You think you want more options, more paths, more skills, more doors left open, just in case you need them later. But somewhere between 6 of those doors and 24 of them, something in your brain quietly gives up. Not because you're lazy, not because you lack drive, because there's a ceiling built into the machine running behind your eyes, and you just walked straight past it without ever knowing it was there. Here's the part that makes this so easy to miss. Wanting more options isn't a bug in your thinking. It's older than thinking. For most of human history, more options meant more safety, another route out of danger, another food source if the first one failed, another ally if the first one turned on you. A brain that reached for more tended to survive slightly better than a brain that settled for enough. That instinct got carried forward, fully intact, into a world it was never built for. A world of unlimited career paths, endless online catalogs, and a search engine that can hand you 10,000 answers to a question you were only ever going to act on once. The instinct still fires. It just doesn't know when to stop anymore. In the year 2002, psychologists ran an experiment that ended up getting cited in thousands of academic papers. Sheena Iyengar at Columbia University and Mark Lepper at Stanford set up a folding table inside an upscale grocery store called Draeger's Market in Menlo Park, California. On the table, jam. Imported, expensive, exotic jam. Some days, the table held 6 flavors. Other days, it held 24. Shoppers wandered past all day, and the researchers just watched and counted and handed out coupons, good for a discount. Here's where it gets strange. The bigger table, stacked with 24 flavors, pulled in more foot traffic. Around 60% of shoppers stopped to look and taste. The smaller table only pulled in about 40%. So far, that tracks. More options, more curiosity, more people willing to stop and look. But then the coupons started coming back in. Of the shoppers who stopped at the 6-flavor table, 30% went on to actually buy a jar. Of the shoppers who stopped at the 24-flavor table, only 3% did. 10 times more people committed to buying something when there was less to choose from. The bigger table won the attention war and lost almost everyone at the finish line. Now, you could dismiss that as a quirk of jam. Nobody's career depends on jam. So a few years later, researchers went looking for the same pattern somewhere the stakes were real: retirement savings. They pulled administrative data on nearly 800,000 employees, spread across roughly 650 retirement plans. Some of those plans offered a handful of investment funds to choose from. Others offered dozens. And the question was simple. Did the number of fund choices change whether people signed up to save for retirement at all? It did. As the fund menu grew, participation shrank. Roughly every 10 extra funds added to a plan cost that plan about 2 percentage points of employee participation. Real people, leaving free retirement matching on the table, not because they decided against saving, but because the menu got long enough that deciding at all became the harder option. Jam and retirement accounts are about as different as 2 decisions can get, and the exact same pattern showed up in both. For close to 2 decades, that pattern just sat there, observed but not explained. Nobody could point to what was physically happening inside a person's skull between looking at the options and either committing or walking away. Then in 2018, a team of researchers based at Caltech ran a version of the experiment again, only this time with people's heads inside an fMRI scanner while they shopped for real, ordinary products, things like mugs and posters. And they found something almost nobody expected. As the number of options climbed, activity in 2 brain regions, the striatum, which assigns value to things, and the anterior cingulate cortex, which weighs the cost of a decision against its benefit, did not just keep rising with each new option. It rose, and then it fell, shaped like an upside-down U6 options. And the brain barely bothered to engage. Too little there to get excited about. 12 options, and engagement hit its peak. The brain lit up, actively comparing, actively weighing, actively working toward a decision. 24 options, and that same engagement collapsed, dropping almost back down to where it started, at 6. 24 choices should have been the easiest set to enjoy. Instead, the exact system built to help a person choose simply stopped trying. Somewhere around a dozen options, your brain is doing its best work. Past that point, it isn't struggling harder. It's giving up quietly and taking your motivation with it on the way out. There's a reason this happens, and it isn't mysterious once you see it. Every option you're weighing has to be held in mind, compared against every other option, and checked against how much you'll regret it if you pick wrong. 6 options means 15 possible comparisons happening somewhere in the background. 24 options means over 250. The math of comparison grows far faster than the number of things being compared. At some point, the cost of finishing that math outweighs whatever reward is sitting at the end of it, and the brain, quite rationally, cuts its losses and disengages. It isn't weakness. It's the same kind of shutdown a computer runs when a process demands more than the hardware can spare. Now stretch this past jam and past retirement accounts, because it doesn't stay contained to a folding table in a grocery store. Every extra skill you pick up, every extra career path still technically open to you, every extra piece of information about who you could become, sitting unread and half-considered in your head, functions the same way as one more jar on that table. You can watch the same pattern play out anywhere choice has quietly gone unlimited. A streaming home screen with thousands of titles that ends in 20 minutes of scrolling and nothing watched. A job board with endless listings that ends in 0 applications sent. A dating app with an infinite deck that ends in nobody actually met. In every one of those rooms, more was sitting right there. And somehow it made the decision harder to reach, not easier. For a while, that extra knowledge genuinely helps. You're somewhere under a dozen flavors. Your brain stays engaged, actively comparing real options, and every new fact sharpens the decision instead of clouding it. But there's a point, different for every person, but real for all of them, where the next piece of knowledge, the next open door, the next possible direction, stops adding clarity and starts adding weight. Your evaluating system doesn't scale up forever to meet it. It peaks, same as it did inside that scanner, and then it disengages exactly like it did for the shoppers standing in front of 24 jars of jam, and the employees staring down a wall of fund names they didn't recognize. This is why the person who reads everything, who keeps every option open, who refuses to close a single door, is so often the one who never actually moves. Not from a lack of ability, from a nervous system that already cast its vote to walk away, and left the rest of them standing there, still thinking. And here's the part that's easy to miss. This isn't a character flaw. It isn't laziness or weak discipline or a lack of ambition. It's a wiring limit. A ceiling almost nobody tells you exists, sitting quietly behind nearly every decision you've ever struggled to make. So, the fix was never to learn more or to keep more doors open. Just in case, the fix is closing most of them on purpose. Long before you ever ask your brain to choose, cutting your real options down towards 6 or 12 instead of 24. That might mean picking 3 career directions worth seriously exploring and deliberately refusing to research a 4th until one of the 3 is exhausted. It might mean unsubscribing from every course, every newsletter, every open tab promising a different version of your future until what's left actually fits inside the size of decision your brain was built to make well. None of that is giving up on ambition. It's giving your evaluating system a set small enough to actually finish evaluating, instead of a set so wide it quietly opts out before you even notice the vote was cast. Because once you understand where that ceiling actually sits, you stop mistaking it for a lack of willpower. You can build a life, a career, a decision-making process that works with the ceiling, instead of one that keeps quietly stalling out underneath it, one open door at a time. If this changed how you think about your own choices, there's more of this ahead. Stick around.